My name is Lotty Wolvekamp and I come from the Netherlands. I was born in a family of 4 children. After 3 boys, there came this girl. I became involved with initiatives of change because of a brother of mine. He was very much involved with a young group at that time. I was 14, he was 21. He had an unknown illness, which he was battling. And then one day we went to the conference center in Caux in Switzerland, which Swiss families had bought after the Second World War, so that people who had been at war with each other, my parents went through the war, could find each other, could find reconciliation, could find forgiveness. And I remembered standing by the balustrade overlooking Lake Geneva in the evening where the sun was slightly setting, and I sensed a presence beside me. And I did not know what that presence was, but I said, God, I don't know if you exist, and I don't know if this is you, but if you exist, I want to serve you for the rest of my life. Now I get emotional. 2 weeks later, the brother, who was also in Caux, passed away in the hospital in Lausanne. And that is what set me off on a road of discovery of faith, also a discovery of what moral rearmament, initiative of change, had been, was, could be. And it helped me. I was expected to go and study history. But then I realized that if I were to study history, I would become quite antisocial. It might be hard to believe that now, but I was a bookworm. And eventually I studied international secretariat. When I'd finished my secretarial training, I knew that I should offer my services to Canada. And Canada was in quite a difficult position at the time. French Canadians and English Canadians were not exactly French, where the French Canadians got their own Quebecois government for the first time, when the Native Americans were in great conflict with the rest of Canada. So I wrote to the Canadian friends and offered my services and said, I finished my training, can I be of service to you in Canada? My return mail came the answer, Lottie, we've been praying you would come, but felt it had to be your own decision and offer. And as Initiative of Change, we played a part in getting to know each other, helping people listening to each other, helping them build bridges in what they were doing. Because if you want to build bridges, you have to listen to the story of the other. There's no shortcut. At one point in the summer at Caux, when I was taking part in a conference, Swiss friends asked me if I were willing to use my secretarial skills to come and work in the conference secretariat at Caux to take it on. And I said no. I wasn't feeling like this at all. And several weeks later, I was up in the high mountains on a hike where the silence was screaming at me. And I knew I had to say yes to this invitation. And I went back and I said yes to that invitation. And taking on the conference secretariat meant throughout the year being in touch with teams around the world who wanted to organize conferences, send people, handle up to 3,000 applications, informing people. At the same time, living in Caux, being part of a community that welcomed people throughout the year, who wanted to know about Caux, wanted to know about initiatives of change. Working with initiatives of change has led me to a life of adventure, of crazy happenings, of sad happenings, but basically to a life of where now at the age of 70, I am tremendously grateful for. When Caux was bought in 1946 by over 100 and other Swiss families, wanting to create a place where Europe, which had been torn apart by war, could be rebuilt. My father was one of those who went with the group of Swiss to look at the Caux Palace, which had been used as a refugee center in the Second World War, where many Jewish people were housed as refugees. And even to this day, many of them come back. Sons and daughters come to see where their parents were welcomed after having been rescued from occupied Nazi territory. Many families from all across Europe came with that same desire to rebuild Europe, to put the ravage of war for once and ever out of reach. That was their motivation. They came, they went into a room, they cleaned it, they painted it, they scrubbed it, they did whatever. And when it was cleaned, they moved to the next room and someone who came totally from wherever could go into the cleaned and remade room. It was a labor of love. When people came, especially from places like South America, even North America, and definitely Australia and Asia, a lot of the journey had been done by boat. So they came to Caux for a long time. And it was that intimacy, the long time spent together, doing the work together, the volunteer work, cooking, cleaning vegetables, cleaning rooms, looking after the garden, painting this, doing that. For many people, it was a miracle that you could go somewhere and meet so many people from so many nations. Over 100 nations represented, which we now think is normal, but it wasn't normal in those days. So that was part of the magic of the time. The conference center in Caux housed about 3,000 people in a summer at the time when I worked there. We always started the morning looking at what was necessary to do that day. Divided the tasks. We made sure everybody had a day off and time off during the day for other things. Go to the lake for a swim, climb up the mountain, and learn about each other. Because we came from very different realities. Something I also learned from my family, and especially from my oldest brother also, is to appreciate the people who work with you. To have a deep appreciation for the work they do, whether it is a simple job or a so-called top job. So whoever worked with me through the summer always got a little gift. Whether it was for a day or a week or a month or the whole summer, they would get a gift from me, which I was hunting for right through the year. Appreciation is a sign of respect. And within initiatives of change, things that are very important are a time of silence, quiet reflection, meditation, however you want to call it. And then there are 4 standards, you call them in English: honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. Honesty is a decision you can take, to be honest towards people in your dealings, etc. Purity of motives is something you can also choose yourself. Unselfishness is also something you can decide you want to be. It's a learning process, all of it is, but you can decide. Love is not something you can decide. Love, for me, is a gift. And I can honestly say, I love people. They frustrate me sometimes, but I love them. During the time I was training as an international secretary, I had the choice also to take Spanish as an extra course, which I did. And I'd always had a sense that One day I would go to Latin America. I don't know why or what. So quite a few years later, I had just finished all my plans for a year. I was asked by this Swiss lady whether I would accompany her to Latin America, where an Anglo-Argentine lady had asked us to come and restart the work of Initiative of Change. It was just after the Malvinas Falkland War. I went, and people who had been working in that continent for a long time said, now you be careful, you are new to this continent, so don't say too much about the Malvinas. But of course, coming there, the very first question I was asked by anybody I met is, what do you think about the Malvinas? And being the rebel I was, I ignored the advice that I'd been given. And I said, look, I lived through that war from the European perspective. That's where I was geographically. There was no other way. But now I'm here. You tell me. What should I think? What should I know? What should I believe? What should I understand? And people shared from their heart. And we met veterans, young guys who had been dropped in the hell of the Falklands straight out of military school. We met politicians, business people, housewives, students. But there was one sentiment they all shared. Las Malvinas son Argentinas. The Falklands are Argentine. And because I and those with me, we were willing to listen to that story, to those feelings, those people who were on different sides of the spectrum were willing to start listening to each other. For me, that has always been the most important thing within Initiatives of Change, that you listen to each other's stories, that you understand the other person or the other group, which does not necessarily mean that you justify the actions or the words of another person or another group, or that you condone what happens in the name of that group. But unless you try to understand, nothing will ever change. What for me is almost an overarching value is respect. If you really respect and appreciate another person, no matter who they are, no matter what they've done, hearing the other story, listening to who the other person or the other group or the other country is, understanding, not justifying, not condoning, understanding, then love is the gift you get given. I remember working with one person in the secretariat in Caux, and that person was a real problem. But I treated that person as a problem, and that was wrong. So at one point, I felt I should apologize to this person for having treated her as a problem. And when I see that I've done something wrong, I immediately want to put it right. I don't want to let it linger. Get it right, go on. And then I had this very clear sense, no, you do not write to her now. And then I waited. And a month later, I felt now is the time to write. And I wrote to this person. And by return of mail came a letter from her, and she said, Lottie, the summer was so difficult. The way you treated me was so difficult. I realized now I had to make certain decisions in my own life. And I've made them, and I've asked God to help me. And then your letter came, apologizing. And she said this was a confirmation for me that I was now on the right track. So thank you. And we've remained friends ever since. We don't see each other much, but we've remained friends. I've not been the person who makes great speeches from a platform. That's never been my role. In a sense, I felt my role has been the enabler, the listener. to feel and accept other people's pain and other people's joy, and helping them realize that because of that, they are an entire person, appreciated, respected, loved. That's what I want for people. Because then they can do what they're supposed to do. Not if you feel worthless or ignored. I think of one particular young man who came to talk to me, sat on the counter in the kitchen, legs dangling, about a very difficult situation at school he was being forced into. Then he said, "My parents are never listening to me. They're always busy." Now, I worked with the parents, especially the father. And the following week, we were having in our office, we were talking, and I said, "Do you actually listen to your children? Do you listen to what they say? Are you aware of all sorts of, who they are at this point?" So we got into that whole discussion. And then a week later, he came back to me and said, "Lottie, but we had that discussion last week. Was that because my son had talked to you?" So I said, "Sorry?" And anyway, they had listened, and the son had talked about what was bothering him, which could have had police consequences if he had fallen to the temptation. But because he was able to talk with his parents, it didn't happen. So, it's these kind of little things. Yeah. At one point in the development of moral rearmament and initiative of change at the time, countries and regions had become quite individualistic. And the need was felt to create more coherence. So during a consultation, which is a gathering of people from around the world that started up in the 90s, first twice a year and then once a year, on topics that were important to all the different associations, foundations, movement groups, whatever, whether legalized or not, was to talk about issues that faced us all. So we talked about finance, we talked about governance, we talked about the wording we used at the time. Are the words we're using still words that are valid for this time? Should we adopt other language? We looked at a debate that had been going on for many years, and which was a debate which was especially valid in what I would say the Western world, Europe, North America, where people felt that the name moral rearmament no longer suited who we were and what we were doing. And to go back to that name, that name came into existence in 1939, before the Second World War, when all of the world, and especially Europe, was rearming militarily. And Frank Bookman, the man who was at the heart and start of moral rearmament, felt that what was needed was not a military rearmament, but a moral and spiritual rearmament, which was a thought which had been voiced by somebody else and which he had picked up. For easy's sake, the spiritual got dropped and we became moral rearmament. But in the 60s, 70s, 80s, with the developments, especially in the West, that name didn't sit comfortably anymore. So over a period of time, there had been many requests, can't we change the name, can't we change the name, can't we change the name? We would then decided that we would have a meeting on this to decide. And this was during one of these consultations, worldwide consultations. We talked about all the possibilities. We had votes. We thought about what a name could mean or not mean. There were suggestions. And in the end, there were two names that were still standing. We had another time of silence, and then we voted. So many votes for this name, and the exact number of votes for that name. Total deadlock. We were not going to finish this discussion. There was going to be no way we were going to do this. So we then decided, this was in America where we had a consultation, we decided we would reconvene in Caux. So after a whole discussion, we love talking. Again, we said, okay, let's vote. X number of votes for this name. Identical number of votes for that name. So again, it seemed a deadlock. But then it's the interesting thing. There was one person who said, well, can't we change the question round? Can't we ask, why can you not live with this name or with that name? And we had a discussion about it. And then we voted. And then there was a unanimous vote for initiatives of change. Initiative of change, when you first meet, seems like a fascinating animal. People are often saying, wow, amazing that it exists. Amazing what it has done. That's true. It has done amazing things. But I feel always that the amazing thing is the individual people. What they can do, what they can learn, what they can give of who they are. And when somebody comes new into IofC or a connection with me, find out what that person is interested in. Give the person a chance to come with his or her story. Find out if that person wants to do something, and help them find ways of doing that. I don't have to say, you have to do that. No. My job is to find out, what have you got to contribute to the big picture of life? That to me is IofC, is to enable individual people to find who and what they're meant to be and what they're meant to do, and help them do it. At the same time, the other thing I feel is very important now is that you can't carry the world on your shoulders, because then you close yourself off to that which you can do. You become depressed or whatever. And you must do that which you are called to do. When someone gets older, there are often questions. Did I take the right decision? Did we do the right thing? And there I think we all are faced with choices in life. And the only thing you can ask yourself is, when I made that decision, when I took that choice, what was my motive behind it? And if it was the right motive, then you can also handle the consequences. And consequences are never what you think they're going to be. I mean, that's, someone who says, I know what the consequences will be, I just can't, no, you don't. Consequences are a result of so many things. I think if I had to start all over again, I would probably make all the same decisions again. I don't feel I've missed things. The thing I'm most grateful for in my life with Initiatives of Change is that I've been allowed to be a listening post, that I've been able to be there. That to me has been the most incredible privilege, that the older generations felt they could come with their questions, their worries for the future, but also that even now the younger generations feel free to come and talk. And I don't pretend I have answers, but to walk on the road of life with the person, to be there at the crossroads, and to give people a sense that they are loved, valued. That is something the work with an Initiative of Change has brought me. It's my faith that has helped me. Initiative of Change is the place where I served.